Welcome to Crafting Your Dream Home with Doxa Custom Homes, where we help you design and build your dream home that lasts generations and nourishes your soul. I'm Jeff, the owner of Doxa Custom Homes, and today I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about creating a home that you love. So this episode is The Love of Home, Reviving Transcendent Home Building. And I kind of want to get into the details about basically what we are looking for when we are building houses, what type of houses we like to build. We really have a passion for reviving classical traditional architecture, and we believe it does more than just look pretty. We actually think that it enriches the soul, and that we were created to look at beautiful things and to live in spaces that make us feel like home. As we know, most houses on the market are pretty ugly. To be blunt, there's a lot of ugly houses on the market. Anything really built within the past 100 years, there's been very much a shift to utilitarian and more just functional over form, and we're trying to get away from that a little bit more. That's really one of the biggest problems we see is people who are looking for beautiful houses, they just really can't find them in most markets. Unless they're in an area with a really rich tradition of historic architecture that's been preserved well. But most of the historic architecture is old, outdated, and needs tons and tons of money and time to reinvigorate. We're trying to build houses that look 100 years old, even if they're brand new, because we believe there's something that connects us to our Creator and to the world around us in the way that architecture used to be in the houses that we used to build. It's important to live in a home that looks like it was built by people who care about you. So think about that. Your house should be built by people who care about the people living in the house, not just about the profit from the house. And that's what we at Doxa Custom Homes are really focused on as we move forward. It's really frustrating to try to find homes to live in that you love and that actually make you excited to be home. And we felt that ourselves. My family, my wife and children and I, we have a really beautiful home, but we also have lived in houses where there's no sort of beauty to the house. There's no objective beauty. It's just built. It's just a place to live in, and you sleep and you go, and you don't feel any certain way coming home to it. But today we're going to talk about reviving the art of home and how to think about crafting homes in a way that really nourishes your soul, enriches your life, and is timeless for generations. We're going to start by talking about the languages of architecture, starting with universal, going to national, then regional, and then local. And then we're going to talk about how those languages have been lost over the past century, and especially within the architecture profession, which I'm not, but in the building trades, absolutely as well. And then we're going to talk about how we can revive the languages and how we can reteach them and reinvigorate that as time goes on in the United States. And then we're going to get into the three great themes of architecture, which this was kind of written by Vitruvius. If you've heard of him, he's a great father of traditional architecture. And he talks about commodity, firmness, and delight. And we're going to break it down in a different way. And we're going to break it down into buildings for people, which is commodity, basically creating buildings that are designed for human flourishing and interaction to serve us. Apparent structure just means that the home should look like it can support itself, which is obvious to some people, but modern architecture has gotten away from that a little bit, trying to build the impossible. And then we're going to talk about the celebration of the act of building and how the house itself, all the different elements should actually celebrate the idea of building and how we build and what it represents in our lives. Let's jump right into it. We're going to start talking about the languages of architecture. And like I mentioned, the first language of architecture is the universal language of architecture. Now, when we talk about languages, what we're really talking about is similar to writing or music, these things speak to your soul. True architecture is something that actually speaks in a way that communicates a message, whether that's where to enter the house, what this building is used for, what area of the world we're in. These things are all communicated by design of structures, and for us, we'll talk about houses. There have been certain patterns in architecture that have been present throughout all time of human history that we know of in all places that are universal. So when we talk about universal language of architecture, what we're really trying to get at is there's certain inalienable, if you will, principles of architecture that that are not regional or national specific. An example of the universal pattern in architecture is the vertical form that actually tries to represent human form, standing vertical proportionally. It's kind of just something we all look at. We're used to seeing other humans walking around upright. That's where we see the majority of humans. And architecture has been modeled after that for a very long time. Another of the universal patterns is just the idea of physical comfort, warmth and light. It's very often overrated, but natural diffused light from the outside provides physical comfort for the person in the home. And houses should be designed to maximize and capture that in different ways. But the idea, that universal language of architecture all over the world throughout all of time has been light and warmth. Having a warm place to sleep so you don't freeze, but also having light enter the house. One of the most obvious patterns of universal languages of architecture is symmetry of the human face. Now, I'm partial to symmetrical houses myself. They don't all have to be symmetrical. However, one of the important key features to kind of hit that universal language has been the entrance of the home should be symmetrical and resemble the symmetry of the human face. And to finish up talking about these universal languages, we're going to talk a little bit about harmonies and the golden rule. And I'm not a musician, so I understand kind of the idea of harmonies, but there's different ratios and things with octaves and, yeah, again, getting out of my space. But there's a similar theme in architecture, and you've probably heard of the golden ratio. It's 0.618, and it's that spiral you see, the Da Vinci spiral. Anyway, I'm not going to go into detail, but it does work. The human form is drawn to that. It's found in nature all over the place, actually, in more places than we can even really acknowledge. It's quite remarkable that God created the world in that way. So we like to basically replicate human form in nature, and that's the idea of universals. So after universal languages of architecture, then there is national languages of architecture. And this is kind of self-explanatory. Each nation has its own specific architectural style that relates to the culture, the widely available materials in that region of the world, and the people who live there. So basically, this language distinguishes different nations and people groups. The national patterns of architecture, they tell us a story about a people and a place. They connect us to our ancestry or the ancestry of the place that we're visiting. It kind of shows a story throughout history. It's meant to be deeper than just one level of people or one age. It's supposed to tie those people to that place and to each other over time, creating a really deep sense of community and rootedness. And that's kind of the whole thing with national. So you start with universal, then you come down to national. And of course, the next language of architecture is regional architecture. And we can understand this in the United States. If you go to New England, you have New England colonial style, you have Cape Cod style houses, you have some English Tudor style, which again comes from England, but has been adapted to certain places in our country. You go a little bit further south into, let's say, Tennessee, for example, and you get Southern colonial style. You get farmhouses. You get stacked porches and certain styles there. And these differences regionally, they're not just a style thing or a taste thing. They also are based on widely available materials and basically the people who were willing to build. They had to use whatever materials were immediately available to them. They couldn't ship things in from a distance. So houses in the Northeast had lots of hemlock because there was a lot of hemlock. So the old log cabins would have been hemlock. And certain places in the South had lots of red clay brick, Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, because that clay was available and they were able to hand make brick in those regions. So those regional distinctions are important, but think of it as a dialect, kind of like Southern dialect versus a Boston accent, which I'm not going to try to do for you because that would be horrible. But each region develops its own architectural dialect that is unique to that region of the country. And this is also true in other countries, but I don't know much about those. But these aren't only stylistic, they're also practical. So houses were long and narrow in the South to allow for deep cross breezes, and they had lots of wraparound porches. The large porch gave us a cool place to kind of hang out and entertain, but also It shaded away the windows on the lower level of the house. So in the south, you had larger porches and more narrow houses. In the north, you had smaller porches and you had a central fireplace that heated the house more efficiently for the more cold winter months. Another cool thing about the southern architecture that I think is awesome is you had taller ceilings so that the heat would rise and it would stay cooler, and then you could use the cross breeze to get rid of that excess heat. So before commercial air conditioning and other HVAC methods, basically you had to live with what you had. Even up into the 70s and 80s, people didn't have widely air conditioning in their homes. So it was important to have a home designed to keep you comfortable during all seasons. And this again kind of speaks to the regional language of architecture. The final language of architecture is the local language. We're not going to talk a lot about this one because unfortunately, with the advent of modern mass production and modernistic architecture, local languages have kind of been gone away with. But just to give you an example of what this might look like is a certain village in Massachusetts that, let's say the houses were all built between 1770 and 1840, they might all have a very similar roof pitch, roofing material, brick, facade. Basically, you could tell they were all made in a similar time and place, very, very micro level on a local scale. And that's just an example. I don't think we have tons of that anymore because of the nature of suburban and urbanization, but it's still important to think about as we try to progress and revive architecture, about how even small localities can have their own slight dialects and taste. So to be clear, the local languages of architecture have been kind of done away with in our modern American society, but all of the languages have been lost to some degree and level. And I think it's important that we talk about what caused that and how to revive that. And really, it's kind of clear to most people what caused that, but just to give you kind of a historical idea, the advent of the automobile was actually the number one driving factor that made architecture more utilitarian and less focused on ornamentation and beauty. People really believed during the creation and widespread production of the automobile in the early 20th century that this would lead to a total transformation of how we live. And it largely has. It has reshaped city planning and caused most cities to be unwalkable or hardly walkable, which again is more city planning, but it is important as we talk about reviving traditional architecture. So that's something that really, really led to a huge decline in the care for human scale architecture. Another thing that, apart from the automobile, that has led to the loss of this language of architecture is mass production in general. The assembly line, the idea that all things that can be created, we can create them faster, more efficiently, cheaper, and produce more and more to increase the profit to our shareholders. And this has led to the lack of agency and autonomy, where people were more and more willing to live in a house that looks just like their neighbor's house, that has no distinctions, no character, no familial ties, nothing. And that is a huge tragedy, but I think that that is being revived and turned away from largely, and that's what we're kind of working towards as well. One of the other things that led to the loss of these languages is, believe it or not, Marxism and socialist ideology, social utopia. This idea during, post-World War II, basically the idea of utopian society because of industrialism and mass production and wealth and prosperity. Many people were really focused on just creating this society where all people were similar and shared the means of production, and this just took away our unique identity as family units and regions and kind of took away our sense of people in place, our rootedness. So we've been deracinated essentially and taught to believe that we are part of the human race, but we aren't actually tied to a certain place or people. So these are important things to remember, that the languages of architecture tell a story about who we are, who our ancestors were, where we live, and what it means to be human. This is important, and I believe it can be revived. We have to get back to more traditional town planning as on the broad scale to actually start to revive the large-scale interest in traditional architecture. Houses can be beautiful and traditionally designed, but if they don't fit into the city plan or the suburbia plan or even rural areas, if they don't fit well and they don't actually function, they're not going to garner any interest from the larger marketplace, unfortunately. So we need to focus on traditional town planning and education, educating people to be more focused on things that are long lasting, to invest in beautiful things, to invest in their own home in a way that goes above and beyond just putting on a composite deck to add $5,000 worth of value or $10,000 worth of value when you resell. We're talking about generational thinking, building a house that you plan to live in, that you plan for your grandkids to be able to live in, that kind of thinking. That needs to be revived in order to restore these languages of architecture to the future generations. Now we're going to talk about Now we're going to discuss the three great themes of architecture, and this has been laid out by Vitruvius, who is one of the ancient fathers of architecture. But it's the idea of commodity, firmness, and delight. And we're not going to talk in those terms because it sounds weird. It doesn't really resonate the same way with us. We're going to call it buildings for people, creating buildings for people, apparent structure, and I'll explain that in more detail in a second, and the celebration of the act of building. And these three themes really kind of lay out the framework as to what we're looking to recreate as we rediscover the languages of architecture. The first great theme of architecture is creating buildings for people. And what this is talking about specifically is buildings that resemble and mirror the human form in some capacity. Like we talked about earlier, an entrance facade should be symmetrical to resemble the human face. But the goal of architecture in this sense is not only to resemble the human form, but also to service the humans who will be using the architecture. But they kind of go hand in hand. So the goal of traditional architecture is really the service of humanity. And again, that's okay. That sounds utilitarian, and some of the functions are utilitarian. Like, for example, there's something to be said about a warm wood-burning stove or fireplace sitting there, feeling the warmth on your face, seeing the flickering of the light, hearing the popping and the crackling of the wood. That kind of rejuvenates your soul. It warms you, but it also makes you feel at home. And as we talk about buildings for people, that's kind of what we're discussing. The idea that buildings are created for people to bless them, and not just for the utilitarian sense, but also to provide delight emotionally, spiritually, physically, and mentally, all of them. The second great theme of architecture is firmness, or we're going to call it apparent structure. And what this essentially means is that houses should look like they're able to support themselves. It sounds simple, right? But a lot of modern architecture tries to flip things and put heavier elements on top to make things look like they're floating. But good traditional classical architecture, you're building from the ground up. Your columns should be wider at the base and narrower at the top. Your house should flow up and in and not up and out. Your house, the elements you use down low, brick and stone, should be heavier than the wood board siding and the metal roofing. It should get lighter as you go up in color and in texture and in weight. This structure should appear as if it can actually support itself. It's that simple. But again, this is often overlooked. Like if you see a lintel above a window, if it's not structural, it should still resemble a structural lintel. It shouldn't look fake. So these are examples. In material, if you can touch it like a railing, you shouldn't be able to knock on it and see that it's plastic and hollow junk. It needs to feel substantial. That makes a house really, really feel like a home. And I think that's important in recovering this traditional architecture. Third great theme of architecture is the celebration of the act of building. And this is really not that complicated either, but it's the idea that elements of architecture should be celebrating other elements while building. So I'll give you an example. The lintel above a window is structural, but it also kind of draws your eye to light, to the window opening, which is light, or above a door, which is entrance and welcome. So architectural elements and building should celebrate itself as you build, but also celebrate the use of the building and the people inside. Kind of like, posts for a porch. They have bases and then they have the shaft and the cap, but the way the cap ties into the beam above should really make it look structurally sound, but it should be something that really is unique and draws the eye. These important celebrations are what make building go from machine, utilitarian to human, local enjoyment. That's really a key feature as well. And I think it's important to talk about decorative arches, lintels, all those things. They're meant to celebrate not only the structural component that they produce, but they're just beautiful. They just are feats of beauty. So to recap, the three great themes of architecture are commodity, firmness, delight, buildings for people, apparent structure, and the celebration of the act of building. These are important to remember. And again, they're very abstract. We're talking philosophical here. When you're looking at modern cookie cutter houses in developments or individual houses, you just see a lack of intentionality of these details, of these principles. These architectural themes and principles are not being applied properly, and we're missing out on some basic things. And I think that is what leads people to have houses that might be nice on the inside, they might be comfortable, they might actually be high end and have decent finishes, but they just don't draw the heart. They don't actually uplift and nourish the soul. It's hard to explain, but it is kind of a feeling thing. It's just you can tell if you're being nourished by a home or not. When we build legacy-minded houses, we're talking about this very thing. Our designs are intended to really draw people's souls to love their home, to keep them rooted in a place, to make them want to invest in the community around them, to bring people into their home, to fellowship, to enjoy one another's presence. These are the things we look to do and we believe are the most important in building timeless homes. It's not just the architecture, it's the lifestyle, it's the joy, the community, and the rootedness that come along with legacy-minded custom home building. I want to quickly define transcendent home building as I used it in the title of this podcast. And transcendent home building is basically when you are in a home or you see a home, it should point you upward and beyond yourself to God, to the world that He created for us. Transcendent home building doesn't mean that you're building the most expensive or luxurious or bougie home that you could think of. It means thinking beyond yourself, thinking 2, 3, 4 generations beyond yourself, thinking about the community as a whole around you and not just your own small property. Really being invested in people in a place is what we're talking about with transcendent home building. And that's part of reviving these languages of architecture and understanding how to apply these principles. The goal is to create transcendent homes where people look to God and look to their neighbors, to love them, to do life together, and to really build something more than just themselves. And these designs, they do inspire life. They should actually edify you and encourage you in your daily life. A transcendent house is designed to make you excited to do life. That's a really important thing. The materials in a transcendent home, they promote longevity, health, endurance, strength. They're meant to make you feel the best you can feel and keep your family safe and secure. And there are also spaces, like we just mentioned, really important here, that they foster a sense of community and fellowship and space of beauty. Space is a beauty. It could be the whole house, it could be individual rooms, it should be both. But this transcendent home, it makes you feel good, it looks good, it makes you think well, it allows you to enjoy other people well. These are things that we're thinking about at Doxa Custom Homes as we design and build homes for ourselves and also for our clients. Now I'm going to briefly touch on the Doxa approach to home building as we talk about transcendent home building. So our design and build process is pretty simple, but we basically charge a upfront retainer to do concept designs and to go through the design process. But what this looks like is we listen to you. We take in your input. We look at your Pinterest boards. We look at your Instagram follows, whatever. You send us YouTube links to videos you like. It doesn't matter. We look at all that. We take it in. And we don't just give you some suggestions. We actually craft you what we believe holds to these traditional principles of architecture that actually speak the language that we're talking about in this video, but also that match your desire and needs. We're not going to let you build an ugly house that doesn't invigorate your soul. Some builders will. Some builders don't care. They just want to make the client happy, and that's great. And we do want to make our clients happy, but we believe the best way to do that is to make sure they're getting a home that is bigger than what they think they need. Not in the sense of size, but in the sense of influence, of impact. Their home should speak volumes in the architectural language, and that's what we're here to do. So we go into concept designs, then we go into pre-construction. We pick out every molding, every fixture, every faucet, every tile, every hardwood color, all of the details, and then we help curate that into a package with your customly designed home, and then we are able to provide you a really detailed contract with all of the bells and whistles included so that you see a final price and it's clear what this dream luxury legacy home is going to cost you, this piece of art, this home that actually you love and that you want to be in. So that's our design process that leads into construction. It really does take a lot of time, often 20 to 45, 50 weeks, depending on the complexity of the home. We really try to hammer down every detail we can to make sure that this home is exactly what you need it to be, but also that it transcends you, that it is a transcendent home that is designed with all intentionality to reflect the classical orders of architecture and to draw the human soul closer and closer to God and to his neighbor. So one of the practical ways we do that was the philosophical answer. We curate and use natural and luxury materials, hardwoods, brick, stone. That's a good start. I mean, those three, if you just had those, you can build a pretty beautiful home. And we try to stick with as many natural materials as possible. And if they're not natural, we want to resemble natural materials for the sake of longevity or durability, that kind of thing. We design every feature of the house with intentionality and purpose. We want the home to be a place where every small piece of the house you look at, you're like, oh, they thought of this before building. And that's part of the design build process that is so impactful when designing a true legacy home. Again, we really want to focus on wellness, lifestyle, investing in your family, legacy quality, those kind of things, a home that really lasts generations. If we're going to build you a legacy home, it better last 3 or 4 generations. It better be a 100-year home. And we care about that, and we think that's really important. It costs more on the front end, but that's the kind of client we're looking to work with. We find that they find us just based on similar interests and cares and appreciation for these things. And you might be thinking the question in your head, why are most modern homes missing the mark? Why do they not feel transcendent? Why is there something missing? And the answer is they negate the language of architecture and the principles we laid out in this video. They really don't think about those things. The whole goal is to produce it as cheaply as possible per square foot, to make it as functional as possible while sacrificing beauty and symmetry and art, really, in most of the cases. And quite frankly, they just are abstract and have no ties to the natural world around them. A lot of modern houses just don't look like anything you find in nature. They kind of look like mongoloids, like large McMansion, megalodons. They're just really, really strangely laid out, and they don't resemble nature at all. So to avoid that, we go through these principles. In our design process, we make sure we're thinking about these things because most people aren't. In Tennessee, it's all over the country though. It really is prevalent. And most houses for the last century have been built just for people to get by and not to thrive. And before that, 100 years, 150, 200-year-old houses, they really do draw the soul. There's something about them that people cannot overlook. And that's what we're trying to recreate with Transcendent home building. So here's some practical guidelines that'll help you real briefly. So if you're trying to design a timeless home, one of the big things you need to do is think simple mass. Think in boxes, not in oblongs or abstract figures. If you want a bigger house, you just add more boxes to it. And that helps keep things centered. It helps keep the mass obvious. Your complexity should not come from roof lines necessarily. It should come from details. It adds a little bit more cost, but it really doesn't when you think about how much more it costs to have all these weird roof lines, dormers, hip roofs. Yeah, you've seen them. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Another thing we could talk about is just intentionality in design and detail. Just ask yourself, why is this here when you're looking at any detail when designing your home or thinking about a remodel? And what is its purpose? And does it bring joy when I look at it? Those things there, if you just ask that in every area of the house, outside, inside, each room, you would be way better off. You would understand more and more what you're actually trying to accomplish in your home. The biggest change of mindset that will help you as a homeowner is just learning to think in the long term, learning to think beyond your own nose, generations out, realizing that building a house used to be an act of love and care for your future generations, not just a place of survival for you. So think about your grandkids. Think about your great-grandkids. Think about when you build a house, realize that if everything else in the world went to pot, you have this home. Sure, the government could take it, there's things, but you have this home. If you can't pass anything else to your children, what kind of home do you want to pass to your children? What kind of house do you want your grandkids to be able to live in? Do you want it to be one that makes them feel something, that makes them love God more, that makes them love their family more, that makes them curious and engaged to understand and learn more about the world around them? Because we do. I want that for my children. I want that for your children. I want our generations to be blessed by living in spaces that really call to them, that create this sense of joy and love and transcendence in their soul, that makes them look to God and realize He is a good creator, that makes them understand the world we live in is beautiful and way bigger than we understand. Houses should do that. And if you're thinking long term, the little bit of money up front, the extra money, let's call it the extra $100 a square foot, which right now seems like a huge burden, but it's worth it. It's an investment in your generations. Let's wrap it up here. We're going to just recap real quick. We talked about the languages of architecture being universal, national, regional, and local, and how those all play into the scheme of everything we are looking to rebuild with Transcendent Home Building and our mission at Doxa Custom Homes. We also talked about the three great themes of architecture: building homes for people, apparent structure, and celebrating the art of building. These things that we've talked about, these themes, they are going to echo into eternity. They are universal, if you will, themes, and they're important to consider as we revitalize and continue to create homes that are more than just places where we sleep, because that's really what our mission is. We also got into our approach to home building, how Doxa builds, our design and build process, why we do what we do, and why we think it's important that you invest in your family's future and your children and your legacy by building a home that really outlives you, by building a house that makes people think of more than just you and your family when they're in it. It makes them think greater, bigger thoughts about God, about the world. This is what we talked about today. Thank you for joining me. If you like this podcast and it gives you value, please subscribe wherever you're listening to it. Follow us on social media, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, all of these things. If you liked it, share it with a friend. Give us a 5-star review. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Jeff, the owner of Doxa Custom Homes, signing off for crafting your dream home with Doxa Custom Homes. Building your home with glory and excellence.